Chester Bennington was halfway through Heavy when he spotted the tiny sign in the crowd. 3 words written in purple crayon by shaky 7-year-old hands. Sing for Daddy. But it wasn't until security brought the little girl closer to the stage that Chester saw the rest of her story. The bald head covered by a pink beanie, the medical bracelet on her tiny wrist, the way her mother held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. And when Chester knelt down to talk to her, what this dying child whispered to him didn't just stop the concert, it changed the final year of his life forever. This is the story of Lucy Martinez and Chester Bennington. A story about innocence and pain, about hope and heartbreak, about how a 7-year-old girl fighting for her life became the teacher of a man who thought he had nothing left to learn. It's the story of the most beautiful and devastating moment ever captured on stage, and why Chester could never sing Heavy the same way again. It started 3 weeks before the concert, in a small apartment in Phoenix, Arizona. Lucy Martinez had been fighting acute lymphoblastic leukemia for 8 months. At 7 years old, she'd endured more medical procedures than most people face in a lifetime. Chemotherapy had taken her hair, her appetite, and most of her energy, but it hadn't touched her spirit. Lucy's father, Roberto, had died in a car accident when she was 4 years old. Since then, it had been just Lucy and her mother, Maria, against the world. When Lucy was diagnosed with cancer, Maria's world shattered all over again. But Lucy, with the resilience that only children possess, had found a way to stay hopeful. "Daddy's in heaven now," Lucy would tell her mother during the hardest moments of treatment. "But he can still hear me when I sing." Roberto had been a huge Linkin Park fan. He'd played their music constantly when Lucy was a baby, singing along to In the End while changing her diapers, using Numb as a lullaby when she wouldn't sleep. Lucy's earliest memories were of dancing in her father's arms to Chester's voice. After Roberto's death, Maria had packed away all of his Linkin Park CDs, thinking they would be too painful to listen to, but Lucy kept asking for Daddy's music. Eventually, Maria realized that Linkin Park wasn't just music to Lucy, it was a connection to her father. "When I listen to Chester sing," Lucy told her mother one night during a hospital stay, "it feels like Daddy is singing to me." When the doctors delivered the devastating news that Lucy's cancer wasn't responding to treatment as hoped, Maria made a decision. Lucy had maybe 6 months left, maybe less. There would be no more surgeries, no more experimental treatments, just palliative care and whatever time they had left together. "What do you want to do, baby?" Maria asked her daughter. "Where do you want to go?" Lucy didn't hesitate. "I want to hear Daddy's music. I want to meet Chester." Maria's heart broke. How do you tell a 7-year-old that meeting a famous rock star is impossible? How do you explain that the world doesn't work that way? But when Maria looked into Lucy's eyes, she saw something that made her reconsider. Not hope. Lucy was too sick for false hope, but purpose. This wasn't a dying child making a wish. This was a little girl who had found meaning in her pain. Maria spent 2 weeks trying everything. She called Linkin Park's management company, but never got through. She sent emails that went unanswered. She posted Lucy's story on social media, but it got lost in the digital noise. Finally, she did the only thing left. She bought 2 tickets to Linkin Park's upcoming concert in Phoenix with money she couldn't afford to spend. The night before the concert, Lucy was having a bad day. The pain was worse than usual, and she could barely keep food down. Maria wondered if they should stay home, but Lucy was determined. "I need to be there, Mama," Lucy whispered. "Daddy needs me to be there." Maria spent an hour getting Lucy ready for the concert. They picked out Lucy's favorite pink beanie to cover her bald head. Maria helped her make a small sign with purple crayon, Lucy's favorite color. At the last minute, Lucy added 3 more words to the sign: "Sing for Daddy." The Action Pavilion was packed with 20,000 Linkin Park fans that night. Maria had managed to get seats in the general admission area near the stage, but they were still far from the front. Lucy was so small that she could barely see over the crowd. "Can you see him, Mama?" Lucy asked when the lights dimmed. "Not yet, baby, but we'll hear him." When Chester and the band took the stage, the crowd erupted. Lucy's eyes went wide as she finally saw Chester in person, the man whose voice had been the soundtrack to her short life. But she was too small and too weak to jump or scream like the other fans. She just stood there holding her little sign, tears streaming down her face. Chester opened the set with 1 step closer, then moved into paper cut. The energy was incredible, the way it always was at Linkin Park shows. But Chester seemed particularly emotional that night. His bandmates would later say they could tell something was weighing on his mind. About halfway through the set, Chester started the opening notes of Heavy. It was a newer song, one that dealt with emotional burdens and feeling overwhelmed. For Lucy, it was special because it was one of the last songs her father had loved before he died. As Chester began to sing, Lucy held up her small sign as high as her weak arms could manage, "Sing for Daddy," written in shaky purple crayon letters. Chester was scanning the crowd during the first verse. When his eyes landed on that little sign, he almost kept singing. Performers are trained to maintain focus despite distractions in the audience. But something about those 3 words stopped him mid-phrase. The band kept playing, but Chester had stopped singing. He was staring at this tiny girl holding up a sign that seemed too heavy for her small hands. Even from the stage he could tell something was different about her. The way she stood so still while everyone around her moved, the way her mother held her protectively, the medical bracelet that caught the stage lights. Chester walked to the edge of the stage, still staring at Lucy. The band sensed something was happening and gradually let the music fade. 20,000 people went quiet, following Chester's gaze to see what had captured his attention. "There's a little girl down there with a sign," Chester said into the microphone, his voice already thick with emotion. "Security, can you help her get closer?" The crowd parted as security gently escorted Lucy and Maria toward the front barrier. Lucy was too weak to walk the whole way, so one of the security guards picked her up and carried her. When they reached the front, Chester knelt down at the edge of the stage so he could be at Lucy's eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Chester asked, his voice soft and gentle. "Lucy," she whispered, but her voice was so quiet that Chester couldn't hear her over the crowd. Chester signaled to the sound crew to bring him a cordless microphone. He climbed down from the stage completely, something performers almost never do, and knelt beside Lucy at the barrier. "What's your name?" he asked again, holding the microphone close to her. "Lucy," she said, her voice now carrying through the arena speakers. Chester looked at her sign, then back at her face. "Sing for Daddy? Can you tell me about your daddy?" Lucy looked up at this man whose voice had been with her through every hard moment of her short life. "My daddy died when I was little," she said simply, "but he loved your music. When I listen to you sing, it feels like he's singing to me." Chester's eyes immediately filled with tears. 20,000 people heard this 7-year-old girl's words echo through the arena. The silence was deafening. "Where is your daddy now?" Chester asked gently. "He's in heaven," Lucy said, "but I'm going to see him soon." Those words hit Chester like a physical blow. This wasn't just a fan sharing a story. This was a dying child talking about reuniting with her father. Chester looked at Maria, who was crying openly, and saw confirmation of his worst fear in her eyes. Chester's voice broke as he asked, "How do you know you're going to see him soon?" Lucy looked confused by the question. To her it was obvious. "Because I'm sick," she said matter-of-factly. "The doctors said my body is too tired to fight anymore, but it's okay because Daddy is waiting for me." Chester completely broke down. Right there in front of 20,000 people, this rock star who had spent his career singing about pain and struggle was undone by a 7-year-old girl's simple acceptance of death. But Lucy reached up with her tiny hand and touched Chester's face. "Don't be sad," she said. "I'm not sad, I just want Daddy to hear his favorite song one more time before I come home." Chester was sobbing now, but he managed to ask, "What was Daddy's favorite song?" "Heavy," Lucy said. "He said it helped him when he felt scared or lonely." Chester stood up, wiping his eyes, but he couldn't stop crying. The entire arena was silent except for the sound of 20,000 people crying along with him. This moment had transcended entertainment. It had become something sacred. "Lucy," Chester said, his voice breaking, "I'm going to sing Heavy for your daddy, but I need you to help me, okay? I need you to sing it with me." Lucy nodded, though she looked tired and pale. Chester helped her climb onto the stage, something that would never normally be allowed. He set up a chair for her and adjusted a microphone to her height. "This song is for Roberto Martinez," Chester announced to the crowd. "Lucy's daddy, who is in heaven listening to every word. Lucy, this one's for your dad." Chester started Heavy again, but this time it was different. His voice was raw with emotion, every word carrying the weight of this little girl's story. When they reached the chorus, Lucy's small, weak voice joined in. "I'm holding on, why is everything so heavy?" Her voice was barely audible, but the arena was so quiet that every person there could hear her singing along. Chester knelt beside her chair, tears streaming down his face as he sang with this dying child. But then something magical happened. The entire crowd began singing along, 20,000 voices joining Lucy and Chester in a song about carrying burdens too heavy to bear. It wasn't a performance anymore, it was a prayer, a tribute, a moment of pure human connection. When the song ended, Chester hugged Lucy gently. "Thank you," he whispered to her. "Thank you for reminding me what music is really for." Lucy looked up at him with wise eyes that seemed too old for her 7-year-old face. "Chester," she said, "can I tell you a secret?" Chester nodded, leaning close so she could whisper in his ear. "Sometimes when people are really sad, they forget that love is stronger than being scared. But Daddy taught me that if you have love, you can carry anything, even the heavy stuff." Chester's emotional breakdown was complete. This child, who was facing death with more grace than most adults could muster, had just given him the most profound wisdom he'd ever received. Chester spent 10 more minutes on stage with Lucy, talking with her about her father, about music, about love and fear and hope. The entire arena listened in rapt attention as this intimate conversation unfolded. Finally, Lucy started to get tired, and Chester knew it was time for her to rest. "Lucy, you are the strongest, bravest person I've ever met," Chester told her as he helped her down from the stage. "Your daddy would be so proud of you." "He is proud of me," Lucy corrected gently. "He tells me every night when I dream." Chester hugged Maria and promised to stay in touch. He gave Lucy his guitar pick and told her it was magic. Whenever she held it, she could feel all the love from everyone who had heard her sing that night. The concert resumed, but it was different. Chester's voice carried a new depth of emotion. Every song became a tribute to Lucy, to Roberto, to love that transcends death. The audience was still crying, but they were also celebrating this incredible little girl who had reminded them all what really mattered. But the story didn't end when the concert was over. Chester couldn't stop thinking about Lucy. That night he called his manager and his publicist. "I need Lucy and her family to have everything they need," he said. "Medical bills, housing, food, everything, and I need it to be anonymous." But Chester's involvement went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. The next morning he called Dr. Sarah Williams, one of the country's leading pediatric oncologists, and asked her to review Lucy's case personally. When Dr. Williams explained that Lucy's cancer was indeed terminal, Chester asked a question that surprised her. What would make her remaining time as beautiful as possible? Dr. Williams had worked with many families facing this impossible situation, but she'd never had a celebrity ask that particular question. "Comfort, dignity, and the knowledge that she's loved," she answered. "Then let's make sure she has all of that." Over the next 3 months, mysterious blessings started appearing in Lucy and Maria's life, but Chester's involvement went far beyond financial support. He arranged for Lucy to have private access to the Phoenix Zoo, where she could meet animals without dealing with crowds. He coordinated with Disney to send characters to her hospital room for private visits. He even arranged for a children's book author to write a personalized story about Lucy and her father, beautifully illustrated and bound in leather. But most importantly, Chester called Lucy every week, sometimes talking to her for hours. These conversations became the highlight of both of their weeks. They discussed everything from favorite colors to what heaven might be like. Chester found himself looking forward to these talks more than anything else in his schedule. "Lucy became my teacher," Chester later told his therapist, Dr. Michael Rodriguez. "This little girl who was dying taught me more about living than anyone ever had. She had this way of finding joy in the smallest things, a butterfly outside her hospital window, a funny story on TV, the way her mother braided her hair. She was dying, but she was more alive than I'd ever been." During one of their conversations, Lucy asked Chester a question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Chester, why do grown-ups forget how to be happy about little things?" Chester didn't have an answer. "I don't know, Lucy. Maybe because we get scared of big things and forget to notice the little things." "That's silly," Lucy said with the wisdom that only children possess. "The little things are what make the big scary things okay. When I'm scared about dying, I think about how soft my blankie is, or how Mama's hugs smell like vanilla, or how your voice sounds like Daddy's did when he sang me to sleep." Chester was learning from a 7-year-old that presence was more powerful than presents, that attention was more valuable than money, that love expressed simply was more healing than any grand gesture. Lucy lived 4 more months after that concert, and Chester visited her 3 times, always quietly, always without media attention. During their first visit, Lucy was having a good day. She wanted to show Chester her art projects, watercolor paintings of angels that her father might look like in heaven. "This one looks like Daddy when he was happy," Lucy explained, pointing to an angel with a bright smile. "And this one looks like Daddy when he missed me." The second angel had kind, sad eyes. Chester studied the paintings with the seriousness they deserved. "Lucy, these are incredible. You're a real artist. Mama says Daddy was artistic too. He used to draw pictures of me when I was a baby." Lucy pulled out a worn sketchbook filled with Roberto's drawings. Lucy taking her first steps. Lucy laughing in a bathtub. Lucy asleep in her crib. Chester turned through the pages, understanding more deeply what this family had lost. Roberto hadn't just been a Linkin Park fan, he'd been a loving father who documented every precious moment with his daughter. "Your daddy loved you so much," Chester said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know," Lucy said simply, "and now you love me too. I'm really lucky. Most kids only get one daddy, but I got Daddy in heaven, and now I have you." Chester's second visit came when Lucy was weaker. She was spending most of her time in bed, but she was still Lucy, still curious, still wise beyond her years. "Chester," she asked during this visit, "when you sing sad songs, does it make the sadness go away?" Chester considered the question carefully. "Sometimes. When I sing about being sad, it helps other people know they're not alone in feeling sad. Does that make sense?" Lucy nodded. "Like when I told you about Daddy being in heaven, it made you cry, but it was good crying, right? Because you understood how much love there was." "Exactly like that. I want people to understand about love when they remember me," Lucy said. "Not about being sick or dying, just about love." Chester's third and final visit came just 2 weeks before Lucy died. She was very weak by then, sleeping most of the time, but when she woke up and saw Chester sitting beside her bed, she smiled the same bright smile that had captured his heart on stage. "I was just dreaming about Daddy," she told him. "He said you've been taking good care of me, and he's grateful." Chester had to leave the room for a moment to compose himself. When he returned, Lucy was looking at him with those wise, knowing eyes. "Chester, I need to tell you something important," she said. He leaned close so she could whisper. "When I go to heaven, I'm going to tell Daddy all the good things you did for me and Mama, but I'm also going to tell him that you're carrying too much heavy stuff, and you need help letting go of some of it." Chester's tears started flowing again. "What do you mean, sweetheart? You feel guilty about things that aren't your fault. You think you have to save everyone. But Chester, love doesn't mean carrying everyone's sadness. Love means sharing your light so other people can find their own way."
This 7-year-old was giving him therapeutic advice that his actual therapists had been trying to convey for years, but somehow when it came from Lucy, it pierced straight to his heart. "How do you know all of this?" Chester asked. "Daddy teaches me things in my dreams," Lucy said matter-of-factly. "He said you have the same kind of heart he had, the kind that feels everything really deep. But he learned in heaven that feeling everything doesn't mean you have to fix everything." During their final weeks together, when Lucy was too weak to talk on the phone for long, Chester would send voice messages. He'd sing to her, tell her stories about touring, share funny things his own children had said, but mostly he'd remind her how much her daddy loved her. The last voice message Chester sent to Lucy was the night before she died. "Lucy, tomorrow you get to see your daddy. I'm so happy for you, but I'm also really sad because I'm going to miss you so much. Remember what you told me about love being stronger than fear. You were right. Your love is so strong that it's going to live forever. In your mom's heart, in my heart, in the hearts of everyone who heard you sing that night. You taught me that love doesn't end when someone goes to heaven. It just gets bigger and stronger and more beautiful. Give your daddy a hug from me, okay?" Lucy Martinez died peacefully in her sleep on March 15, 2017, exactly 4 months after that concert in Phoenix. She was holding Chester's guitar pick in one hand and a photo of her father in the other. Chester was devastated by Lucy's death, but he was also profoundly changed by having known her. At her funeral he sang Heavy one more time, but this version was different from any he'd ever performed. His voice carried not just grief but gratitude, not just pain but purpose. "This song used to be about burdens I couldn't carry," Chester told the small gathering of mourners, "but Lucy taught me that the heaviest things in life, love, loss, hope, grief, these aren't burdens to be carried alone, they're meant to be shared. Lucy shared her love with all of us, and now we get to carry it forward." The ripple effects of Lucy's impact on Chester were profound and far-reaching. Chester established the Lucy Martinez Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research, funding it entirely from his personal wealth. But more than that, he began visiting children's hospitals regularly, always quietly, never for publicity. Chester changed after meeting Lucy, observed Mike Shinoda. He'd always been empathetic, but Lucy taught him something about the power of presence. He learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is just show up and pay attention. Chester began incorporating Lucy's wisdom into his music and his life philosophy. He started talking more openly about the difference between helping and healing, between fixing others and sharing their burdens. "Lucy taught me that dying isn't the worst thing that can happen to someone," Chester reflected in one of his final interviews. "Living without love, living without purpose, living without connection, that's worse than dying." Lucy was dying, but she was more alive than most people I've ever known, because she loved so purely and was so deeply loved in return. Chester established the Lucy Martinez Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research, funding it entirely from his personal wealth. He began visiting children's hospitals regularly, always quietly, never for publicity. He said Lucy had shown him that music wasn't just entertainment, it was medicine, comfort, connection. "Lucy taught me that dying isn't the worst thing that can happen to someone," Chester reflected in one of his last interviews. "Living without love, living without purpose, living without connection, that's worse than dying." Lucy was dying, but she was more alive than most people I've ever known. Chester carried Lucy's story with him for the remaining months of his life. Friends say he talked about her constantly, often tearing up when remembering their conversations. Her photo sat on his desk in his home studio, and he'd look at it when writing music. The song One More Light, co-written after Lucy's death, was directly inspired by her. The lyrics about someone's life mattering, about every light being precious, were his tribute to a 7-year-old who burned brighter in 7 years than most do in 70. When Chester died in July 2017, Maria Martinez was heartbroken but not surprised. "Chester loved too deeply," she said. "He felt everyone's pain as his own. Lucy's death broke something in him that never healed." At Chester's funeral, Maria shared how Chester had promised Lucy he'd see her again. "I think Chester knew when he made that promise that it might be sooner than expected," Maria said. "But I believe they're together now, and Lucy is finally teaching him the songs they sing in heaven." Today, the video of Lucy and Chester singing Heavy has been viewed millions of times. Comments come from around the world, people sharing stories of loss, hope, and music's power to heal. Parents with sick children, adults grieving loved ones, people fighting depression, all finding comfort in Lucy's message that love is stronger than fear. The Lucy Martinez Foundation has funded research leading to new pediatric leukemia treatments. Maria became a pediatric nurse, helping other families navigate childhood cancer. Lucy lived only 7 years, Maria reflects, but changed more lives than most do in 70. "She showed Chester his music could heal, not just express pain. She showed me that losing someone doesn't mean losing their love. And she showed the world that even the smallest voices carry the most powerful messages." Every year on Lucy's birthday, Chester's and Lucy's families gather to remember them both. They play Linkin Park music, share stories, and remember that love is stronger than fear, just like a wise 7-year-old once taught a broken rock star. The last thing Lucy said to Chester: "When you're scared or sad, remember that love doesn't die. Daddy's love didn't die when he went to heaven. My love won't die when I go to heaven. And your love won't die either. It just gets bigger." Those words became Chester's final comfort during his darkest hours. Perhaps Lucy's love really was strong enough to carry them both home. Lucy Martinez didn't just make Chester cry on stage. She reminded him and us what we're here for. Not to avoid pain, but to love through it. Not to fear death, but to live fully while we can. Not to carry burdens alone, but to share them with those who care. Sometimes the greatest teachers come in smallest packages. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most broken places. And sometimes a 7-year-old fighting cancer can teach a grown man how to live. That's the power of love. That's the magic of music. That's the legacy of Lucy Martinez and Chester Bennington. A reminder that no matter how heavy life gets, we don't have to carry it alone.